on Kidsmag,
the newest video game,
as we visit the Consumer Electronics Show.
Kidsmag is next. Good morning and welcome to Kidsmag. I'm Katie Lee.
And I'm Ruth Lamborn. Did you ever wish you could see the future? If so, then you'll enjoy today's show. We have a special edition of Kidsmag for you. Last weekend in Chicago, the biggest video game companies gathered together to give the world a preview of their newest games. And today, we're going to take you to the Consumer Electronics Show for a look at what's on the way this fall. Here's our tour guide, Kidsmag reporter Brandon Millman.
Twice a year, the biggest companies in the U.S. gather together to show off their newest video and computer games. That's what the Consumer Electronics Show is all about. And this year, all the companies were playing the number game. By the numbers game, I mean that they were talking about the kind of system they're making games for, or will be making games for. You all remember the original Nintendo system. It played 8-bit games. Then Sega brought out the Genesis system, a 16-bit system. That was followed by the Super Nintendo, another 16-bit system. Most of the games being shown were for one of those systems, but they weren't the only games around. A big display was set aside for the 32-bit 3DO system and the impressive games it offers. You could also find the machine that's behind the comeback of Atari, the 64-bit Jaguar. But the big two aren't asleep at the switch. Sega announced its new 32-bit system, which you'll see more of later in the show. And Nintendo officially announced that its 64-bit game system, named Nintendo Ultra 64, will be hitting homes in the fall of 1995. Are you confused yet? We'll try to clear it up as we take you on a tour through the future of games and show you some of the new games you can be looking for.
Have you ever heard the phrase, "It's a jungle out there"? Well, at the Consumer Electronics Show, it was a jungle in there, in the Nintendo booth, that is. But there was a good reason for the jungle decor, as the company showed off a new game that stars a familiar face.
There's an old joke that goes like this. Where does a 500-pound gorilla sleep? The answer is anywhere at once. You could say the same thing about Nintendo. Its lineup features the biggest video game monkey around. That ape is also one of Nintendo's oldest stars. Back in 1981, he co-starred in a game with a little guy with a red cap who would later become Mario the plumber. The big gorilla in that game was named Donkey Kong. This is definitely the year of the ape at Nintendo, as Donkey Kong returns in a game for the portable Game Boy and also stars in an incredible new game for the Super Nintendo system.
Well, one of our biggest games is Donkey Kong Country. It's for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and once you get a look at it, you won't even believe it's for the Super Nintendo. Donkey Kong uses something called ACM, Advanced Computer Modeling, and it's something that is utilizing the Silicon Graphics technologies. The characters that you see are very three-dimensional. There's a lot of depth in the game, a lot of rich colors, fantastic play control, and it's huge. The game keeps getting better and better each time you play it.
Of course, Donkey Kong isn't the only new game that's on the way. Another one is a remake of a classic arcade boxing game.
Super Punch-Out! For fans that remember, we had Punch-Out in the arcade, and we've finally taken it to the Super NES, and it's a lot of fun. You've got 16 different fighters, some you've seen before, some new ones, but it's great.
Of course, there are quite a few other games on the way, too.
We've got about a dozen games that are coming out for the second half. Tin Star for the Super NES, Stunt Race FX, which utilizes the FX chip, Uniracers, Illusion of Gaia. For the Game Boy, we have Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Land. And for the original Nintendo system, we also have Wario's Woods.
The weak link in Nintendo's lineup has always been the Game Boy. With only 2 colors and a tiny screen, it's tough enough to get the most out of the games. But that problem has finally been solved with an attachment that lets you play those Game Boy games on your TV set.
It's an accessory that looks like a Super Nintendo cartridge that fits into your Super Nintendo, so you can play Game Boy games on your TV screen, big and in color. So you finally get the Game Boy games in color. There's a lot of great titles on the Game Boy that haven't gotten a lot of attention, but now you can play them on the Super NES.
You can expect Nintendo to keep going all out as it tries to prove that it is still king of the video game jungle.
The fastest star in the world of video games has to be Sonic the Hedgehog, and he's the mascot for one of the fastest moving companies of them all, Sega. That company had plenty of big announcements at the show, and good reason to smile. Here's Brandon to explain.
The phrase you hear a lot around Sega is, "We're number one," and they have a good reason for yelling that. Sega has the number one 16-bit system with the Genesis, the number one CD-ROM system with Sega CD, and the number one color portable system, the Game Gear. Soon Sega will be able to add the only 32-bit system that upgrades for the 16-bit Genesis. That's what you have to look forward to with the Genesis 32X.
It's coming out in November, and what it's going to do is it's going to take everyone, we have, by the end of this year, there will be 18 million people who own Genesis systems and Sega CD, and those people will be able to take a 32X system, add it on, and suddenly all of their new games that are 32X games can play at 32 bits of power, which means better graphics, more fluid graphics, faster action, better modeling, so objects on the screen rotate and scale at a very realistic rate. It just means overall better gameplay.
The beauty of the Genesis 32X is that it's not a separate system that you buy. It plugs right into the original Genesis, so you can enjoy 16-bit or 32-bit games on the same unit. Of course, Sega has plenty of new games on the way. This one is top secret. They're only showing us the logo from the game, but the name says it all. It's called Sonic and Knuckles.
The most exciting thing that we have going on in software this year is Sonic and Knuckles. And it takes our character Sonic and introduces him to a new signature character for Sega called Knuckles.
Of course, Sega has a lot of other games on the way.
We're going to have a whole range of games that are based around new characters for Sega, characters we've designed ourselves. There's going to be a title called Dynamite Headdy. There's going to be a whole nother game called Baby Boom, which all have lovable characters that you've not seen before. Plus, we have some characters that people know and love, like Echo the Dolphin.
If you look at the video games out there on the racks, you'll notice that most of them are for older players. Sega hopes to give younger players some games of their own with two new lines. One is called Pico. Those games are aimed at kids under the age of 6. And then there's the Sega Club, which has games for kids over 6. With a new game system and loads of new games on the way, Sega continues to live by the phrase that any game fan will agree with, bigger is better.
Coming up next on Kidsmag, we'll check out the 3DO, the Jaguar, and tons of new games, so don't go away.